Meeting agenda, or regular meeting to order. George, can you take the roll?
Mrs. Bissell?
Here.
Mrs. Cobain, she's out of town. Mr. Miko?
Here?
Mrs. Thacek, I believe she's on her way. And Mrs. Hausum.
Here.
3 present, we have a quorum.
Okay. We stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next on the agenda, we are going to enter into executive session for, is it on here? It is.
Yeah, it's on there.
Sorry, I got it.
That's okay.
Wait, no, it's not.
George, go to the last one. I can read, it's the,
I'm sorry.
no, that's okay. I thought it was on the, George, go to the second executive session.
Yeah, I'm pulling it up. I was gonna read it.
Sorry.
Okay, yeah, just read it if you would. Just number 1.
To consider the employment of a public employee.
We will enter into executive session at 6:16, and we plan on resuming in public session at 7 PM.
We have to take a vote.
Oh, we have to take, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second?
Motion by Mrs. Bissell, second by Mr. Miko.
Mrs. Bissell?
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Yes.
Mrs. Hausum?
Yes. Motion passes. We'll resume by 7 PM. Right, we're going to resume public session at 7:17. Next on our agenda is our strategic priorities. Our district has developed and is currently engaged in a 3-year strategic plan which reflects the values, beliefs, and hopes of our students, staff, parents, and community. There are 4 strategic priorities to the plan: transforming teaching and learning, aligning staff and resources, cultivating culture and climate, and leveraging funding and facilities. Our strategic priorities give actionable focus to our district's purpose and mission and guide the work of our strategic plan. Next, under item D, is agenda changes, and those are all listed in the agenda. Those are going to be under George's report, so we'll address those then. And next, I'll turn over to Dr. Iba for recognitions.
And I'll ask Ms. Stovcek if she's going to go and do our extra mile award for the month.
This month for Extra Mile, we went to Kinsner Elementary School. So I would like to invite Mr. Marconi to the podium to speak about the winners from Kinsner Elementary for this month.
Good evening, Board of Education. Evening, families. So my name is Lou Marconi. I am the principal of Kinsner Elementary. Today I have the honor of, I'm first going to recognize a Kinsner Elementary teacher, and then I'm going to have our monitor, Ms. Hovanek, stand up, and she'll come up here after we recognize our teacher to recognize an outstanding student that we have. So first, I'd like to recognize Mrs. Emily Gundert, second grade teacher at Kinsner Elementary. If we could give her a round of applause. Ms. Gundert, do you want to come on up? She loves the spotlight, so the more that camera can be focused on her, I know she's all about that. It's with great pride and joy that I announce Mrs. Emily Gundert, our outstanding second grade teacher, to be honored with the 2024-2025 Extra Mile Award. This recognition is a testament to her exceptional dedication and the positive impact that she has on students each and every day. For those of you who may not have had the pleasure of interacting with Mrs. Gundert, allow me to paint a little picture about the incredible educator that we have at Kinsner. Her enthusiasm for education is contagious. She consistently goes above and beyond to ensure that each student receives top-notch learning and experience. I feel like every time I'm walking into her classroom, there's always some type of hands-on project. You don't see that in every room, but Emily it just authentically comes from her. She spends a lot of time outside of school hours planning and prepping. Ms. Gundert is always seeking to improve her craft, staying up to date with the latest educational research, best practice, bringing a fresh and effective teaching methods to her classroom. She's a member of our literacy committee. She's actually the leader of it. She's the lead of student council and the student technology club. She participates in professional development sessions, and she shares her expertise with fellow teachers, which elevates the quality of education across the district. She works closely with her colleagues and school leadership to continually enhance our educational programs. Her positive attitude and team-oriented approach make her an absolute joy to work with. We're incredibly fortunate to have an educator like Emily. She embodies the spirit of going the extra mile for our children. Her commitment to excellence not only benefits our current students, but it also contributes to the overall success of our school community. Please join us in congratulating Mrs. Gundert on this well-deserved recognition.
Just thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. This is sort of like the second half of my career, and I don't know, it's so nice to be here in Strongsville. Thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here, too. Thank you.
Hello. My name's Sam, and I am a monitor at Kinsner, so I open yogurt all the time. And I wanted to recognize Paige Smeal. She is a 5th grader. Would you like to come up here with me? Okay. So I've been at Kinsner for 3 years. I'm going off script, so get excited. This is going to be good. I've been at Kinsner for 3 years, and so over that time, I've had the opportunity to watch Paige grow from a 3rd grader to a 5th grader. And she is everything that Mustang Pride is supposed to be. And she does it without even without trying. I mean, it's just, she just does what she needs to do because that's what she's supposed to do. So she arrives happy and in a great mood, and when she's not in a great mood, she feels comfortable sharing that with us. She's always engaged and very determined to get things done, and is just a real joy every time we see her. The most interaction I've had with her is that she is in my sign language club that meets weekly. And she is officially one of our big kids over there, and she's very helpful with the little ones, always makes them feel included, and will help to teach them. There's 45 of them in the club, and I only open yogurt, I am not a teacher. So she's like my little sidekick and helps me rein in all the little ones and make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do and helping them to understand some things about the language. So I think one of her most admirable qualities is that she is very attentive to everybody else's needs, and she helps to be supportive with everyone. She's just a great example of leadership, and I'm just really proud of her because I feel like she does the right things because she wants to do them, not for recognition. She doesn't do them for pride tickets. She doesn't do it for Kinsner cash. She doesn't do it to be here. She does it because she's a good person and a good soul and comes from great parents and a great family. And so I'm really proud of her, and I'm glad that we have a few more months with her at Kinsner before we send her to the middle school. But she's very special to us. So congratulations, Paige. Do you want to sign anything? No. Can I thank anybody? No. No? We're good. She's like. Yeah, exactly. Congratulations.
Very proud of you.
Good job.
Congratulations again to Kate and Emily for doing such awesome work at our school. And I know, Emily, you said you're so grateful to be here. We are grateful that you are a part of our district. You've been a shining star ever since you've got here. Kate, look forward to exciting things as you go up to 6th grade next year and throughout your school year. So very proud of all of you. So next, we want to recognize some additional outstanding students. So I'm going to bring up our athletic director, Denny Ziegler, to kick us off for our next recognition.
All righty, thank you, Dr. Ibo. I think for the next couple months, you guys are going to be seeing a lot of me with all of our state qualifiers and our, teams that we have that have been able to qualify for our state meets. So I want to introduce our dance coach, Coach Grimm, to recognize our state qualifying dancers. If you recall, they are the 2024 defending state champs. And these girls have put in a lot of work since the 1st of August. And so they're able to compete in the January state meet. And we were 0.6 points away from another state title. So I want to call up Coach Grimm right now to recognize the dancers.
Hi, thanks for having us. So this team had another outstanding year. It was incredibly tough competition at states this year. It was our hardest competition yet. We competed against huge programs that are national competitors and title holders. We qualified for states this year in all 4 categories that we entered, and this year marked our 5th year qualifying for states. At states this year, we placed 6th in pom, 4th in hip hop, 3rd in lyrical, and 3rd in jazz. And like Denny said, our jazz score was less than a point, 0.6 away from that state championship title. I'm so proud of this team and all their hard work this year. And I want to say thank you so much to this district, the school board, and the athletic department, Denny Ziegler and Jason Kepler. Thank you so much for all your support, for funding our competition entry fees, for helping us attain practice space. Your support means so much to this team, and we are so very grateful. So thank you. So I'm going to call up each of the dancers. So Briar Amelong, Maria Anagnastu, Bryn Conlon, Eliza Gorman, Maddie Gorman, Kate Jersich, Peyton Caulfield, Julia Kelly, Liana Kravik, Nina Kravik, Anna Moravchik, Maddie Morris, Kylie Sanick, Lizzie Stetter, Mackenzie Teague, and Zoe Tran. Congratulations, girls.
Well, again, congratulations to everyone. We appreciate everyone's hard work. Next on the agenda is public comment. I do not have any slips for public comment. Does anyone want to make public comment? Okay. Next, item G is approval of minutes. Motion to approve the minutes for the February 13th, 2025 work session. All audio recordings will be a permanent part of the minutes and are available upon request through the treasurer's office. Video recordings shall be maintained based on the availability of the selected digital online platform. Next up, I will turn it over to Mr. Angonastu for his report.
Thank you, Mrs. Hausum. I have a few items for your consideration tonight. The first being the financial report for the month ended January 31st, 2025. The monthly report and the supplemental report are listed in the agenda. I'm going to go over the supplemental report as I usually do. So total revenues so far are $860,000. $720 less than the previous year through January. When we get to that section, I can kind of go over the reason for that. The total expenditures are about $3.1 million higher than the previous year, and then our cash balance is about $1.2 million higher than it was the previous year. How we're comparing to the forecast, how it's trending. Revenues are trending about $49,000 less to the November 5-year forecast, while expenditures are trending about $497,000 less to the 5-year forecast. So a net potential trend is of $447,000 favorable impact to the cash balance. We're projected to end the fiscal year at June 30th with an estimated cash balance of $47.5 million, which is lower than the $51.3 million cash balance that we ended prior fiscal year. Revenues, as I stated, month to date, or just looking at January compared to last January, revenues were down about $1.5 million, $1.6 million. It's due to local taxes. We receive our first advance, so we receive our tax collections in two phases, first half of the year and second half of the year, and it's kind of similar as the county bills them. So since our fiscal year overlaps 2 calendar years, the first half collections for us are the second part of the previous calendar year, and then the second half for us is the first half of this current calendar year. So due to the reappraisal, the county sent out the bills a little bit later than usual last year, so it delayed a little bit of the collections. So we receive an advance in January, a larger advance in February, and then our settlement in March. So for this year, our settlement, our advance for January was about $1.6 million less. We did receive our settlement for February as we're closing the month, and that was about 50% less as well. So far through February, we received about $9.6 million in our tax settlements. Last year, we received about $16 million. So we're about half of what we received. So overall, we received 9.6 through February. Last year through February, we received 21.2 million. So we'll need to collect, our settlement will need to be 23 million in March in order to hit our forecasted numbers. I asked the county as to what they're expecting, and they just gave me the calculation on how they calculated it. So it was pretty much that the settlement's going to be the difference between the first two advances, which I already knew that, but they're not predicting what the settlement will be. So my hope is that they'll receive what we're supposed to get. If not, it's not going to be a loss. It'll just be pushed to the next settlement, which for us it overlaps fiscal years. So it kind of changes the split. So we'll see. We'll see the middle of March. That's when we receive our settlement. And then state revenues are about $79,000 higher than they were compared to last year, and other revenues are about $23,000 less than they were. And as we'll see in the forecast section, that's primarily due to interest income. Interest income is trending less. Two factors. One, with the cash flow, our advances were a little less, so it's less cash, and the interest rate is a percent lower than it was this time last year as well. It was 5.6 versus the 4.5. Year-to-date revenues are $860,000 lower, and that's primarily due to the local taxes that we just talked about, which is about $1.2 million lower compared to last year. Salary and benefits, expenditures compared to January of last year to this year, they're about $686,000 higher. And then year-to-date, we're about $3.1 million higher, primarily salaries and benefits and purchase services. And how we're trending against the forecast, revenues is trending about $49,000 less against interest income. We're trying a little different strategy to maximize our interest by keeping more in Star Ohio and less in our U.S. Bank, kind of try and make up the difference. And then also expenditures are trending less compared to the forecast, primarily in salaries and benefits due to a lot of open positions that we have across the district. and vacancies as we fill one position and another position opens up. So overall, it represents about 0.5% of annual expenses of the overall $91 million projected expenses. So we'll keep trending it out every month and see how we compare. And then in May, we have our updated 5-year forecast. And then as I move off for the financial report, I also want to touch on, it's not an agenda item, but I just wanted to include in my report. Earlier in February, the Governor, DeWine, had to propose his biennium budget. There was a proposal for the school funding formula. As you may have seen in the news, as part of the funding formula, I apologize, Richard, if you're going to touch on any of this in your legislative update.
Apology accepted. Go on.
For the state funding formula, he's going to continue the phase-ins, which is great. However, he's going to keep the base cost inputs the same as dating back from fiscal year '22, and he's going to reduce the proposals to reduce the guarantee amounts by 5% in year 1 and 10% in year 2. After getting further clarification on what that means, so they're dating back to funding based on 2020. So right now, there's a guarantee in the formula that basically after all the state puts in all your inputs to the factors of the formula for each district, it spits out a number, and then it compares it to a previous year. And currently, it states that you can't receive less funding than you have from the year before, so that's the guarantee amount. Currently, we've always been on the guarantee since I've been here, and even in previous formulas, we've been on the guarantee. In the prior formula, we were about 50% of the state funding on the guarantee. Now, of the close to $9 million, we're about $800,000 to $1 million. It kind of varies based on different demographic factors. But right now, we're about $800,000 on the guarantee. So the good news is we're less on the guarantee. But in his reductions, it's going back to the 2020 calculation. So starting at that year 2020 base, so it's reducing the base. So that 5% reduction for us will mean a $317,000 reduction. And then the 10% will be about a $634,000 reduction in our state funding. Although his simulations show that we're going to receive an increase of $191,000 in year 1 and then another increase in year 2, that increase is a net number. We were always going to get an increase because of the continuation of the phase-in. So that increase is less than what was forecasted. So on how it impacts our forecast, that from our November forecast is the phase-in is going to continue, but the guarantee is going to be reduced. We're going to have a $300,000 reduction in year 1 of the formula, and then in year 2 and moving forward, we'll have a $600,000 reduction. Any questions, or does that make sense? Okay. Okay. And then, so right now, it's just as we've seen in previous biennium budgets, the governor's proposal is just the first stage. It goes next to there's testimonies, and it's just not just the funding component. There's other factors outside of education, and there's other education bills that are a part of this as well, non-monetary. But as the process begins, there's testimonies, then it goes to the state house, and then from there it moves on to the Senate, and then there's back and forth, and a deliberation team gets together, and as we've seen in the past, this will finally get approved in a different variation close to the end of June 30th when it has to be enacted. So we'll continue to monitor the process. As we find out additional information, we'll share. Our local representative, Mike Davila, he's head of I believe the Education Finance Chair. When he testified, he used Strongsville as an example, along with similar districts like Strongsville. So, and I believe Dr. Aba's been in contact with Mr. Davila's team and will continue to be as well. So, any questions on that aspect? All right, so moving on. Grant approvals. We have several grant approvals for this meeting. Be it resolved upon the recommendation of the treasurer that the following grants be approved for fiscal year '25. We have an SEF grant for Sarar, One School, One Book project for $500. This next one is a combination of an SCF grant and then a PTA council grant and individual PTA council. So although she's not here, I just wanted to give credit to Sharon. So the SCF 4th and 5th grade district-wide internet safety assembly, the SCF is funding $3,315, and that grant is made possible by the Catan Family Foundation grant that was given to the SCF for this purpose. That was passed through with Sharon approving that grant on that side. And then PTA Council is going to donate $1,000, and then each elementary PTA is going to donate $500. And then the remaining cost of $250 per elementary school is going to be paid by the school's principal's account. So it's going to be a 4th and 5th grade internet safety assembly next month over a 2-day course. The assembly is going to be in every elementary school in the district. And then the next grant is a combination grant as well for unified sports with SCF donating $575, Strongsville Rotary $2,400, and the Strongsville City Club donating $2,400. The next item, 3, be resolved upon the recommendation of the treasurer that the following student activity program budget revisions be approved. MD Vocational, which is the Derby, an increase of $20,000 from $69,000 to $89,000, and that's based due to the volume. And then the Strongsville High School mile unit, an increase from $10,150 to $23,200. That's the activities group that the Unified Sports is run through, so it's accounting for the additional dollars that they just received. And then the last one is a adoption of a student activity program budget, purpose, and goals. It's for the Strongsville Middle School Drama Club of $10,000 based on the generous donation from the Strongsville Community Theater. Thank you, Michelle. And lastly, be it resolved upon the recommendation of the treasurer that the amended permanent appropriations for fiscal year 25 be approved, and the changes are listed in the exhibit. So if there's no further questions, that concludes my report.
I just want to take a minute and thank our partnership with all of our community groups, the SEF, all of our PTAs, the Community Theater, Rotary, I don't want to miss anybody. Who else did I?
City Club.
City Club. I mean, we couldn't do these programs without our partnership, and we appreciate that and enjoy working with them, so thank you. All right, next I'll turn it over to Dr. Iba.
Thank you, Mr. Hausum. I have one item under my section, and it is just the annual renewal of our membership with the OHSAA for the 25-26 school year. Any questions on that? I'm going to turn it over to Steve. Steve, here, get the clicker here for you.
All right.
So one of the things I'll pass out, there's a handout here for you, one of the things printed so you could see. But as Steve is getting ready tonight, he's going to share an update on where we're at with our transportation services, as well as some considerations from the board moving forward.
All right, good evening, everyone. I want to thank Dr. Iba for the opportunity to come in and discuss this important issue with you tonight. I also want to thank members of the Transportation Department that are here, supporting me or watching me. Big Brother's either watching you to comfort you or make sure you do the right thing, so I appreciate them being here, and I appreciate the work that the department does every day. The reason for the discussion tonight is we need to discuss the current state of the Transportation Department and options in the future for the board to consider. I don't have anything on for any action items tonight as it relates to this. It's just presenting the information to you, showing you a picture of where we're at, where things could be going, and steps that we could take or options that we could enact in the future as it pertains to the Transportation Department. So of course, the first thing to do is tell you where we're at as far as the current state, routes, and staff. So currently, we have a three-tier system, which means that we transport high school, middle school, and elementary schools separately. There could be an argument that there's a four-tier because we do transport preschool, but the preschool transportation is very locked in with laws, with who can be transported. There's not going to be much movement with that. I mean, some of the numbers may increase here and there, but by and large, I have excluded them from a lot of this data. Not that they're not important, but no matter what we do, whatever decisions we make, the look and the scope of transportation at the preschool will not change. We do 100 routes each day, 23 routes to the high school, 38 at the middle school, and 39 to all the elementaries combined. So makeup of the staff, we have 50 drivers. That includes 3 floaters, so we have 47 contracted. This is Mrs. Jones's route, right? There's 47 of those. We've been able to, with your help and decision, to hire floaters, that when people are absent for whatever reason, the floaters are able to step in, and there's 3 of those currently in place. 3 substitutes, and I have to put them in there because we are relying on them more and more all the time for office staff. So that's 2 office staff, that's 2 office workers, and then also 2 leadership, the assistant transportation director and the transportation director. They all have their CDLs, and they're all being used as drivers at this point on a continuous, almost daily, I would argue a daily basis for all intents and purposes. So 51, another fact about the staff, 51% of the staff, and that does include aides, because that's just drivers. I did not include aides in this at this point. But 51% of the staff, that includes aides, and everyone that's listed there are over 60 years of age. I think that's important to acknowledge because that means with some other items that I'll bring to your attention, we're looking at a group of individuals that their time in the workforce is not at the beginning. For more, and because of some current legislation that went through, it may be towards the end of their career of driving the bus. So that is an important fact to acknowledge. As far as attendance and retirements, we have, like I said, 57 drivers. Absence trends, we have 5 drivers out on FMLA currently. That's about the trend that we've been seeing over the past 3 years. 2 of them, 2 drivers are going out on FMLA. We believe we're going to get 2 back, but the reality of FMLA is when you think someone's coming back, think again. There may be reasons for that to happen. So the best guesstimate is for the 2 that are going to go to FMLA, we will get 2 back, so that's even. We average between 3 to 5 drivers out daily for sickness, personal reasons. So on a daily basis, we're covering an average of 8 to 10 drivers absent each day. As far as hiring, the district has been hiring between 2 to 3 drivers a year for the past 3 years. There is no secret. There is no group of drivers hiding somewhere. Somebody would have found them by now because we've scoured the globe. Nationally, there is a shortage of bus drivers. This is not a problem that's indicative just to Strongsville. You go to the networks that I'm a part of as a business manager, and you mentioned transportation, and you want to block everything that comes after that because it's all the same. We don't have enough. We're trying these things. We're trying those things. But it comes down to the fact that we are not attracting drivers into the profession at the rate of which drivers are leaving the profession. As far as retirements for us, per our understanding, and again, it all depends. I've had people that work for me that they've been retiring for about 20 years now. But we're very confident in saying that we have at least 4 retirements that are coming up this year. It is important to understand that there is, in effect, that the new legislation, the Social Security Fairness Act, just very briefly, It used to be that if you were part of a federally funded or a state-funded retirement program, that you had very little access to any kind of Social Security funds that you had accrued in a previous career. That has been taken away. So now people at a rate that they've never been able to before are able to access years of service that they would have otherwise not had access to. The result of that is still unknown. Some of the aspects of that legislation is still being worked out. But when it's fully realized in the future, the upcoming future, the near future, I believe it's going to lead to more retirements for people who were not expecting to have as many years of service. So they're going to be leaving a little bit earlier.
Steve?
Yeah.
Before you go further, can you go back?
Sure.
I just want to make sure I understand forward. One slide. The 50 available drivers, and then do I back out the 5 drivers on FMLA, or would that be 55?
No, you back out the 5.
That's what I wanted to make sure. Thanks.
So, current state overview, each day the Department of Transport just under 3,000 students. The exact number is there, 2,932. This is being done with an average of 8 to 10 drivers absent each day. That includes the FMLA. Due to the overall average age of the drivers on the fleet, we'll continue to lose more drivers than we are hiring. Our office staff and leadership have seen drastic increase the amount of times they need to be used. And they are also then being paid when they're not on the clock and they still have to drive. They are being paid an hourly rate. So this is not only an increase in cost of operating the department, but also results in a decrease in the time that they're actually in the office doing the duties that they were hired for in those positions. Also, many drivers are having to drive their routes and then come back and drive either in part or whole routes that are outside their contracted, which of course, and I believe in all fairness, they are getting compensated for because they're doing more work than they had contracted to do. And so that is also an increase in operational costs. We have been methodically since, I can tell you that since COVID, we have been methodically going through reducing routes, reducing and doing it systematically so that it matched the number of drivers that we also had. But at one point, we were very driver light, and we had, I believe it was like 6 routes that were uncovered at one point. So we had to drastically go through and say, okay, we have too many routes. We cannot do this. There's not 6 drivers waiting somewhere for us to hire them. So we've been methodically, and we read the tea leaves when it came to that, we've been reducing the routes, we've been combining routes. Even as early as this year, we had a driver that is no longer with us, and they didn't die or anything. They're just no longer with us, so I don't mean to be morbid. But we were able to look at that route and pick it apart and dissolve it because that was going to be an open route that we would have to keep covering every day. So this is constantly happening. Our routes are constantly being revised because we're constantly having either students leave the district or students come into the district, which continuously makes these routes have to morph and adjust as the students come in. And then also, as you're aware, because you help, you make the decision, I just bring you the data, we have done our best to look at all of our non-public, parochial, charter, community, I don't think I've missed any categories, but I'll say et cetera in case I did, schools, to say, is it practical to transport? And throughout the past 4 years, we have gone through and eliminated transporting to schools with our resources, with our buses, with our drivers, those schools that attendance made it impractical. There's quite simply no more juice to be squeezed from that segment. We are where we need to be at this point with those non-public schools or schools that are not part of our district. Any questions on that? So the conclusion, not of the presentation, there's still more coming. But the conclusion right now of our current state is we need to have a discussion. We need to have a discussion because all of these factors I'm telling you about is leading to a place where we're not going to be able to provide the services that everyone's expecting and that we've been able to provide given the resources that are diminishing in our fleet, namely our drivers. So we need to start looking at what does the future look like and what are some potential options. So the factors that are leading me to that, number of retirements versus the number of new drivers, number of daily absences versus the number of subs and the number of routes, the frequency of times when the office staff and leadership have had to drive. And I know this is something that's come to your knowledge because it's come via you to my desk in some cases. The lateness of buses to schools, the phone calls, because I have children in the district, I get the robocalls as well that this bus is going to be running up to 20 minutes late. And I know some run even sometimes later than that, depending on how many drivers are out that day and circumstances of what's going on a day-to-day basis. And so the other point that I want to highlight is, and as we'll dive into the chart here in a minute, but this cannot be understated. Any statistically, I wish I could say it if I could understate it, any statistically significant increase to students requesting transportation at any level, that's middle school, high school, elementary, any significant increase is going to push us past the point where we can't service those kids. Because what happened last year is we also had a federal state mandate that says nobody can arrive to school a half hour late, and they can't be at school a half hour later. So we have these rules and regulations that have come down to help us be more efficient, but they're hamstringing us and making it to the point where this year, for the first time that I've been here, you'd have to ask some of the drivers because they've been here longer than I, we've had to actually cancel routes for the day to some of our non-public schools because we quite simply didn't have the drivers to drive that day. So we had to call parents up and say, we're sorry, for these reasons, absences, having to do splits and rework everything, we cannot transport your children today to the school. You're going to have to drive to the school. It's been infrequent enough that the parents have been receptive to that and understanding, but that is something that we cannot continue to do and have any chance of being successful as a department, and I don't feel like we're putting ourselves in a good spot because those things are happening for the first time ever. As far as any questions before I move on? So this is right from the it used to be ODE, now it's the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce website. So as a minimum, we have to transport students in grades K to 8 who live more than 2 miles from their school. So we're reading that right. You do not legally have to transport students that are grades 9 to 12. And you do not legally have to transport anybody that lives under 2 miles from the school building. So, however, if you do choose to, and it's a local decision to do that, you have to do it equally. So, for example, you can't say, well, I'm going to transport to the high school, 9 through 12, but those kids have to be 2 miles away from the school building. The elementary can only be a mile away. When you do for one group, you have to do equally across the board for all, regardless of enrollment. So our current and I do want to say, because there have been questions and I've gotten phone calls from various groups as far as, so if you go on Google Maps and you measure out a mile in a circle, that is not what the Ohio Transportation or the ODE and W do. It's traversable route, all right? So literally from the school door where the school bus stop is, the door that's across from that stop when they let kids out, walking a mile in the most direct and traversable route is a mile, which is why we have gone the route of non-busing streets. So if you go on our website and you go to each of the schools, they have a list of non-bus streets. And some of those streets are actually split as well. So that's how we determine a mile. It's not just a radius on the map. It's the actual streets. what we do as a service to our kids is that even students that live within a mile, if they live on one of our busy thoroughfares, Prospect, Howe, those students, if there's no sidewalk there, we still do transport them. Also, students that are placed in out of bounds. So if for example, there's a student at Sarar in second grade, or they're in Sarar's catchment, but Sarar is filled in second grade, we then move them to the next closest school that has an opening, and then we provide that transportation. So that regardless of where they live in the district. So quite simply, that sometimes adds a significant amount of time onto the routes because the thought of, well, the school's right there and all these kids are right next to it, that's not always the case. It depends on how the schools get filled up. Sometimes we may be going all the way to Whitney's catchment to drop a student off at Kinsner due to enrollment trends. So we'll go to the spreadsheet. I put it up here, but I thought that'd be too small to read, so I blew it up and put it on a sheet for you. So what I want you to notice on the spreadsheet, let me open it on my computer here. I've gone through the numbers and tried to extrapolate and try and see the trends and give you an indication of where this is going. So what I did is I said, here's our current at a mile, how many students that we're transporting. At 1.25 miles, this is how much how many students we would transport. The same for 1.5 miles, and the same for 2 miles. So I like numbers and I like the data. However, I have to tell you up front, there are some guesstimates that are involved in this. The data that's real numbers right now are the current at 1 mile. So that's correct on there. At the SHS, we have 1,739 students that are eligible. However, only 490 students take advantage of the transportation service. That's not uncommon to high schools to not use transportation to their advantage. They'll drive, or if older brother and sister drives, they'll catch a ride or whatever the case may be. But we're at 28% of our eligible riders are using transportation services. But because the high school services the entire district, we can't have just one bus pick up 40 students. So the buses say they hold 72. That's not 72 high school persons, all right? That's barely, I would say that's not even middle school persons. That's barely elementary persons to fit 3 to a seat on a bus. Realistically, we're looking at 48 because there's 24 benches on the bus. So we could easily say, okay, well, why are we running so many routes? Well, we're running so many routes because we also need to make sure we're getting students to the school building within a certain amount of time, from pickup to delivery, and in relation to the school bell. So those are the amount of the routes that we're running. If you look through the middle school, 82% of the kids are using, or students are using the busing service. Chapman, 52%, Kinsner, 63%. So you can see how many students are using and how many are not, how many are eligible and how many are not. This is why I'll harken back to that point of any statistical difference that increases the amount of students that are riding is going to throw transportation services into a tailspin on a daily basis. So for your consideration, if you want to pick a school like Kinsner, 524 students are eligible because they live outside of a mile, 330, which is 63%. If all of a sudden something happened and that 63% turned into 73%, we would have a very hard time driving those students because you're talking about adding routes for people that we do not have in the department.
Do these numbers change at all throughout the year, where you see that in the beginning of the year, the numbers are higher than towards the end, like especially the high school? Maybe they get to know somebody who then drives them to school who otherwise wouldn't, or people moving into the district, and like, do they track certain spots? Like, we used to have 3 kids that get off at this spot, but now nobody does for the past 7 weeks?
Yes, so these numbers are always fluctuating, not only for the reasons that you said, but also sports. Some
Right.
sports require more participation, so students don't ride the bus because they're in practice. So it's not only seasonal, but it may be by month because someone had a birthday and now they get to drive.
Right.
It may also be that we have a bunch of students that leave the district, so these numbers are always in a little bit of flux, but these are real numbers for when we pulled them a couple weeks ago. All right, so, if you were to look back at our state report, we're trending, it's statistically not a difference, about 50 kids from what our state report is to right now. All that means is that for all of our buildings, we had a couple kids lose here and there. They went to other districts, they may not ride anymore, but during count week, which is the second week of October, that's how many kids we had on the bus. So it's always the snapshot. So where some of the guesstimation, I would say, comes in is when we start talking about the 1.25 and the 1.5, and then I'll be honest, I'm not going to spend too much time on the 2 mile. I know that's the state minimum, but I would not. I don't want to entertain that at this point, going to the 2 mile. And quite honestly, the numbers start to fall apart a little bit to the trends because, for what I'll say right now. So when we look at Kinsner, if you go to 1.25, the number of students eligible drops by 119 students. So now eligible students is 335, and the estimated transport number is 211. So how I come to that number is I say, okay, well, whenever we had 524 kids, 63% of them rode. So when I go to 1.25, I get this number. I carry on that only 63% of that established number is going to ride. That may not happen. We may have 100% of the students that live at 1.25 decide they're going to ride. All right? It's still less than what we're transporting at the mile, but I don't want to get so, I know I need to put the numbers on there. The numbers are following the trends, but something about the trends when it comes to transportation is there's some non-quantifiable numbers that happen. The same thing happens with 1.5 miles. For Kinsner, it drops down to 306 students eligible. That's 137 students from a mile. But again, I'm saying, okay, 63% of those students, so we would only be transporting 193. So there's no way for me without looking and going through the data, and it would take me a long time and a lot of hours to do it, to actually plot what percentage of people that are living 1.25 miles away are using the bus. So I just carried over the trend. Does that make sense?
I do have one question, Steve. I'm wondering how you account for this in the numbers. Like my kids, for example, ride home in the afternoon, but they don't ride in the morning. So is that a number we have to consider or not?
So it's not statistically different because there's so few times that happens. However, I did look at both how many students were transporting in the morning and the afternoon. I put the greater number for the building down there. So some of them are the morning and some are the afternoon. I did put the greater number just because the numbers would then be more realistic. So as you look through again, I did it going out to 2 miles and how many routes would be needed. So if you look down the left-hand columns there, I just took the information and said, so if we're at a mile, we're running 100 routes. If we went to 1.25 miles away from the building, they're non-eligible, that would drop out 10 routes. But I don't want you to equate routes with, the equation isn't routes equals driver, because drivers may drive 3, sometimes 4 routes, depending if they have a midday or not. So the general rule that I used on this was right about for every 3 routes that you lose, you would then turn that driver into a floater. Because we're still dealing with the absences. We're still dealing with the FMLA. We're still dealing with the retirements. So to say we're going to cut positions is not going to help us. It's actually going to keep hurting us because we're stretched to the limit right now. we need to start reducing, for your consideration, we need to think about reducing the amount of students that we're transporting, keeping the same level of drivers that we currently have to alleviate our office staff from driving primarily, and then also alleviate a lot of these, I drove my route, now I have to drive another route, or I have to drive a partial route. And having people that were contracted for this time now working much longer times than they originally thought. So as you go through, the difference at 1.25, like I said, is 10 drivers. So then, yes, you would lose the number of drivers needed by, I put 4 down there, but we would go from 3 floater positions to 7 floater positions to make up for that. You still have your 3 subs, and I put in there that constant of there are still 4 office staff that are needed. So as we move from 1.25 to 1.5, you see we cut an additional 6 routes. So we move, instead of 7 drivers, we move to 8 drivers. I'm sorry, 7 floaters, we move to 8 floaters. And then, like I said, 2.0, I don't think is in the realm of possibility, but I did put the numbers there, where we would have 40 contracted drivers and 10 floaters. So again, not reducing the staff in any way, because I feel like we're stretched to the limit. What we're trying to do is reduce the amount of times that especially the office staff is having to drive, the number of times that the drivers are having to do more than what they've been contracted for. All right. So options that are available to us, increase the radius of whether it's 1.25, 1.5, or 2 for non-bus students. We could always consider eliminating high school busing for all students grades 9 to 12, or we could consider the combination of the first 2 bullets, or there's always the 4th bullet, do nothing at this time. All of that's on the table. I did want to be honest with the board and say that there are pros and cons, of course, to every decision, because there's always ripple effects when the decisions are made like this. If we choose to eliminate high school busing, there are some operational pros. There's a reduction in the budget for transportation. It allows for a restructuring of the schedule at the middle school and elementary school. So what I mean by that is we're always crunched because the time that the middle school lets out and the time that the elementary school is let out, by the time people are fighting traffic, by the time, whether that be on the middle school property or off, there's always the lateness of getting into the elementary schools that is at play. If we did eliminate the high school tier, we could bump up the middle school to start a little earlier, which would open up that window of opportunity, both in the morning, but there's not many complaints in the morning. It's mostly the afternoon. And then also, the operational, I put under operational pros, but I put a question there as well. Since statistically, we are transporting 28% of the student body. If we don't decide to do anything with them now or in the near future, I think it would be wise to put some kind of trigger in there to say at this point, we're only transporting X amount of students, and the X would be, of course, up to the board to decide. I do feel like there should be some kind of trigger in to say we're transporting at such a low rate to the high school, we should consider eliminating that tier. I'm not saying that day is today. I'm just saying that is something for consideration. So the cons of eliminating high school busing, it does not address the issue of needing to transport less students at other levels. So we could eliminate high school busing, and we're still talking about the fact that we don't have enough drivers for the middle school and elementary schools. So it does absolutely nothing to reduce the core issue that I'm trying to raise for your attention. Also, it's a reduction of hours for bus drivers, and that will result in less drivers in the fleet. That's just naturally going to happen. Also, it's a reduction in state funding, increase in parents needing to find out transport for their children to the school building. And then also, if we are going to start messing around with our start and end times, we need to coordinate with our other schools in the area that we transport to that are not in our district to make sure that their start time and end times coincide with when our new start time and end times would be. And that would take some cooperation and potentially could cause some issues. So those are the pros and cons of eliminating high school busing. There's also pros and cons in eliminating or increasing the radius that we're making students not eligible for the bus. So the operational pros, again, a reduction of students to transport on a daily basis, reduction of routes needed to transport the students. We can maintain the level of drivers by increasing the amount of floaters available. A reduction and elimination of the office staff and leadership of driving students. It will allow for an increase in students if the trends start to change. So that's the, hearkening back to that point, because I think it is important. If we stay at our current levels and there's a rise, like I said, we're going to be in a tailspin. Increasing the radius and keeping the same number of drivers allows us to have that wiggle room for students to come back. And now we could always add back in routes if needed at that new 1.25 or 1.5 and not be in a tailspin. So it will give us that breathing room for new students to come in. And just to put this in context, there is a reason why we put trailers on our properties. The trends are saying that we're going to have an influx of students. So this could help with the trends that we're already anticipating and have invested in the district. And then also, it's a more timely transportation service for students to and from school. You know, the point is the buses would be running less late than they are currently. There are some cons, obviously. There's an increase in parents needing to find transportation for their children to the school building, and there's a reduction in state funding for transportation. And also, it is going to increase the traffic at some of the schools. If the students are not getting the bus, they're going to have to get there some way. I'm not saying that I'm not so naive to think that they'll all walk. A lot of them will be riding in cars, especially in inclement weather, and that does put more cars into the parking lot at those times. So, with all that being said, and I appreciate your attention, the options to consider are make no changes. We remain at the 1 mile. However, we need to hire 4 drivers that need to be replaced because of retirements, and also 4 more drivers would need to be hired because we cannot keep relying on our office staff to fill in the gap and have any kind of consistency with the work being done that they've been hired for. So in essence, if we keep it at the 1 mile, what we're hoping to keep the same level that we have this year, and this isn't a debate, this is 4 people retiring, we need to hire 8 people next year. And that's not been our trend in hiring, to stay at the 1 mile. An increase of the radius of the non-eligible students to 1.25 miles away does result in an estimated 413 students needing to find other means of transportation. Again, that's estimated because that's just following the trend. That number may not be that high, but it will be higher than it is now. Reduction of 11 routes, increased floater positions from 3 to 7, allows for an influx of students, and then also 4 drivers need to be hired. However, sometimes the office staff will need to help supplement. That's just the reality of it, depending on the daily absent rate. If we increase the non-eligible students to 1.5 miles away from the school building, again, it's going to result in more students. At this point, it's an estimated 680 students needing to find other means of transportation, and that's students at all 3 levels. Reduction of 18 routes. I would recommend we increase the number of floater positions from 3 to 8 so we don't lose any drivers. This again allows for an influx of students to be transported in the future, and the 4 drivers needing to be hired. And I would say at that point there would be a significant reduction of the office staff needing to drive on a daily basis if we were to have that deep of a cut. It is also the option I would just consider, if I could be so bold as to say, keep the high school busing as it currently is done. And then, like I said, having a discussion, whether it be in the near future or some other time, about what are the triggers that would prompt us to not have high school busing at Strongsville City Schools any longer. So with that, that's my multimedia presentation. Dr. Ryba loves the variety and color in all of my
That's right.
presentations. So
Yes, I said this traditional black and white presentation by Steve Breckner. It's his signature. Thanks, Steve, for outstanding work in putting that all together. And as I've shared with the board, the purpose of this presentation, as Steve shared, is to bring it to your attention as to what the real challenges are. Just to reiterate, our trends are 2 to 3 drivers we're able to hire. We have 4 retirements coming up. That trend does not cover the retirements, let alone get our office staff to get the job and do the job they were hired to do. So we wanted to present this with options. The goal for tonight is if you have any further questions for Steve, information you want him to gather and come back with as you ponder this, resources you want him to bring, this is the time to do that. And then, Laura, you would give direction in the future as to when you want us to bring this back to you for more of a formal discussion and decision from the board. So are there any resources, informational points that you want Steve to consider, research, and bring back to you at a future time or in a board update?
I have a couple of things. I'd love to know what other people that bringing it to us for our feedback, but what other people have you talked to? First one that comes to my head, obviously, is the drivers. They know this the best. They do it every day. What do they think about the effectiveness of these choices? So that's one thing. Or if there's other parties that we need feedback from, I'd like to know what, have that feedback for our next discussion.
Okay.
It seems something needs to be done. That's what's obvious to me. If we do any kind of change in our mileage, I'm going to use Sarar as an example because that's what I know. If we go down to 1.25 miles, there's going to be 75 fewer students riding the bus. Let's just, for sake of argument, say every car that comes brings 2 students. We're looking at 37 more cars in the parking lot. There are days when it takes me a solid 5 minutes on Preem to move from the 2 houses down from the entryway, into the parking lot to park. What happens when we add 37 more vehicles, not only to the line and its movement, but also to the safety for the kids in the parking lot? Because every day I hold my breath when I go there and do a 360 twice over before I move my car because there are kids in the parking lot. I would want to know what kind of solutions we have proposed to deal with that. And I'll say it out loud, but we all know it. I can't even imagine what this would be at the middle school. It already is a situation that we've been working on remedying for a long time, and it's the best it's been since we've opened the middle school, but it's still not functional. So I didn't even look at those numbers, but if you had that many more parent cars, I just don't, what do we have to change to adjust that? And I would like to know that ahead of time. And I know the answer to this, but when we do the next time, I'd like, if you could just give us a quick rundown for the public, of the things we've already tried to remedy this problem in other ways, because there's a list of those things. I want to make sure that the public knows that this is not the first thing that we went to.
Sure, yeah.
We tried to preserve this for as long as we could, but we're to the point where it doesn't appear that we can. So, thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to see bus utilization.
Mhm.
So, for example, we talked about you can only have so many kids on a bus, or else the time on the bus takes forever. So I know we have the stats, I just kind of like to see that. At the high school, are they half full, are they a quarter full? However it plays out. And then a breakdown on hours of the bus drivers.
Okay. As far as they're contracted, or what they're working after they've done the splits and everything else like that, or both?
What they're working.
Okay.
We have 50-some odd bus drivers. Are they all working 8-hour days? Are some of them working 8-hour days? Some of them are working 4-hour days? So I kind of want to understand that.
Okay.
When do you need a decision by, when do you need a decision made?
I think if we take a look, I'm just trying to think off the top of my head, if we take a look at getting the information that you want, Steve informed the drivers yesterday about the meeting and the purpose of the conversation, so he'll have an opportunity. You have a staff meeting in March, I would assume, can talk to the drivers and the department at that time. So I'm thinking if we can get some guidance in April,
Yeah, I could do that.
that could give us enough notice for our parents and
Right.
start to go down that route. The one point, and Steve shared so much information, it's on your sheet, but just for the public view, Steve talked about how these numbers don't include preschool. It also doesn't include special education transportation at our other buildings, because for the same reasons, those are locked in. Those are not going to be impacted. So when we talk about the 50 routes, the 50 routes are for all of our other routes outside of preschool and special education. So we have more routes than that, but that's what we're counting in terms of that could be impacted by this change in radius.
Correct, thank you.
Yeah.
I did note on there how many special education routes are being run to the buildings, but yes, they're not included in the final totals at all.
The only other thing that comes to mind is the before care and after care. Are we maxed out anywhere where they couldn't accept more kids, just for working parents who might have to utilize that if they have to drop off?
Last update I had with Right at School was late fall, and they had room.
Okay.
There was nothing that was closed out, no. I mean, we have good numbers, but we've got room.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Any questions you still have, Steve? You good?
No, thank you for your feedback, and I'll get you the information that you're requesting.
Thank you.
The second item in my section are some gifts to the district. Mr. Ed Hayes donated 2 Hosta Arc foul shooting aids valued at $120 to the Strongsville High School Athletic Department. And that concludes my section.
Thank you, Steve. Next, Nicole's going to do the curriculum report for the month, and as she walks up, I think it's important to note that our other Director of Elementary Education celebrates a birthday tomorrow, so happy early birthday to Aaron. Would you like us to sing for you, Aaron?
Oh, boy.
Oh, boy. I would, but I'm a little sick. I'm recovering, but happy early birthday. Go ahead, Nicole.
Good evening. I have 7 items tonight. The first is an early field experience placement with Walden University. Items 2 and 3 are the programs of study for both the high school and the middle school. Sean Collins did an outstanding job with those. Number 4, we have the Strongsville Gifted Services Plan and Early Entrance Guide for 2025-26. And items 5, 6, and 7 are all travel items. We have DECA traveling to Columbus and, if qualifying, to Orlando, Florida. The high school boys varsity and junior varsity lacrosse teams going to 2 places in Perrysburg and Ann Arbor. And the request for the Spanish teacher, Mrs. Barba, to take kids to Costa Rica in June of 2026.
And Nicole, all of those trips are paid by the attendees, or?
Right, with the exception of, we're sending the
Yeah.
DECA students to Columbus on a bus.
Yeah.
We're paying for that.
Okay. Any questions for Nicole?
And if they advance too, we use our student activities fund to pay for the national trip.
Thanks, Nicole.
Thanks.
Next, we've got Andy Trujillo with the Student Service Report.
Good evening. I have one item this evening, and that is extended school year for students with disabilities. So every year, I come and just share the information in terms of the location and the dates. This is for preschool and school-age students, starting June 16th, going to July 17th, and we're at Strongsville Middle School.
Thank you, Andy.
All right, thanks.
Next, we'll bring up Ryan Cobain for the Human Resource Report.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I have the following items in human resources for your consideration. Item 1, retirement certificated. Item 2, retirement non-certificated. Item 3, appointments. Item 3, appointments certificated. Item 4, appointments non-certificated. Item 5, appointments certificated substitutes. Item 6, appointments non-certificated substitutes. Item 7, appointments, certificated athletic supplemental contracts. Item 8, appointments, non-certificated athletic supplemental contracts. Item 9, appointments, game workers. Item 10, changes in hours, non-certificated. Item 11, changes in status, non-certificated. Item 12, contract recommendations, non-certificated. Item 13, leaves of absence, certificated. Item 14, leaves of absence, non-certificated. Item 15, unpaid leaves, certificated. Item 16, volunteers, chaperones. And item 17 is a correction.
Any questions for Ryan?
Thank you.
There are no items under technology tonight, so that concludes my report.
Great, thank you. And happy birthday, Aaron. Rich volunteered to sing.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Aaron. Happy birthday to you. And many more.
All
Mike,
right.
I could hear you whisper all the way over here. I couldn't hear you sing.
All right, so that brings us to our report on Polaris Career Center. Michelle?
Yes, I am looking up all the amazing things that are happening right now. At Polaris, a couple of things to note. I'm really excited on Saturday. There's going to be the Build Her program that is sold out. So I think it's
That's
36
amazing.
seats. They have 36 female students who are going to come check out construction trades. So I'm hoping to stop up and see what that's all about, and I'll be able to bring a report after that. Another event that's coming, and I have some dates you can put on your calendar. Camp Discovery, so that's a very popular summer camp program that Polaris offers. It's only in the third or fourth year back after a hiatus. It's fantastic. If you're aware of what summer programs are right now, it's also very affordable. So if you're looking for something, registration for that will open March 21st. And if your kids are interested in particular areas of study, for example, culinary, you want to sign up right away. And then camp will take place June 9th through 12th. That's Monday through Thursday, approximately 9 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. And that is an awesome experience. So if you have a child, a rising 6th through 8th grader, you will be eligible for that. So be on the lookout for signups coming up in March. I also want to share, if I can find it here, there was this really lovely event on Friday. One of our own students, why is her first name cut off? Oh, there it is. The Wieland, Chloe Wieland, or Weiland, I apologize. She's a Strongsville senior that's in the dental assisting program at Polaris. She was awarded the Walsh University Presidential Honors Scholarship, which comes with full tuition. So the representative from Walsh came up to Polaris on Friday, and they did a big reveal celebration for her, and it was I was so glad they videoed it that I could watch. Just such joy and I think relief. In that moment. So congratulations to Chloe, well done. Then we also have, what else do we have? Continuing the construction on the ERA project, so stay tuned for the opportunities that is going to bring. We had, Cameron, you had a superintendent's meeting. I
Yeah.
heard that went really
Yeah, it
well.
was great.
So Diane got all the superintendents together. They had a long but productive meeting, I heard, which is fantastic to get everybody on the same page, but also advocating for their own unique needs. We also are working on a partnership with a medical facility, O'Neill Healthcare, where students will be able to be placed and learn, but also get paid while they're doing it. So lots of new opportunities upcoming in the coming months, and then again in the fall. So I'll bring you some more. Oh, Polaris Palooza is coming up too. March 14th, our students compete at Polaris. It's always fun, and we are always very successful. So I will look forward to seeing what comes out at Polaris Palooza as well. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Report on legislation.
George did a really nice job of previewing the report on legislation. But just to echo those comments, this is that time every 2 years where we seem to do a little bit of a dance. We're laser focused on the education portion of the budget. I would recommend that anyone in the audience that's a Strongsville resident or citizen to make sure to contact both Rep. Mike Davila and State Senator Tom Patton to let them know that, you know, we expect and look forward to their advocating for the best interests of Strongsville. At the end of the day, as George alluded to, this is, you know, the first portion of this. It is a negotiation. For those of you who remember Schoolhouse Rock, it is a mini version of how a bill is made. So right now, it's in the hands of the House. It'll then go to the Senate. Then it'll have to have a combination, and I'm brain hiccuping on the word, but a combination, and then ultimately it goes to the governor, and he then gets to use his line item veto on anything there. So there's quite a lot of moving parts, but what's important is that we advocate for what's in the best interest in Strongsville. And at the end of the day, we send more income tax to Columbus as residents than we receive back. So any arguments about fair and, you know, what is equitable or what have you, at the end of the day, we send more income tax south than we get back. And so I'm always comfortable advocating to keep our funding growing in the right direction. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Next, board liaison reports, City Council. City Council did have a meeting last week. I just want to send a congratulations to Rick Miller, who was named Dispatcher of the Year by the Knights of Columbus. Rick was nominated for the honor by his peers at the Southwest Emergency Dispatch Center Dispatcher for his leadership and willingness to assist. So thank you, Rick. And last but not least, the mayor will be doing his State of the City, March 18th at the Rec Center. The luncheon will start a little bit earlier. I think doors open at 11 and luncheon is starting at 11:15. So if you want to hear straight from the mayor what's going on with our city, you can buy tickets online at the Chamber of Commerce. That concludes the report. Strongsville Education Foundation, just want to thank them again for the help with the cybersecurity for all of our 4th and 5th graders. I'm looking forward to that. I'm hoping that I can catch one of those assemblies, and maybe I can pick up some cybersecurity, help myself. And again, PTA Council, you know, their help as well for this assembly. And their next meeting, March 13th, thank you. And I'm sorry, I should have asked you if you wanted to give that report.
I think, Cameron, correct me if I'm wrong, but we had like a weather day, the day of the PCA council, last one, is that correct? And so
Yes.
there actually was no meeting and no
Okay.
specific new updates to report. So the next one will be March 13th, at which point we'll be able to report it to you.
I don't know if you want to touch on Founder's Day. I wasn't able to go,
Oh,
but
I did. I went to Founder's Day, and they honored recipients of the Founder's Day Award. It comes with a long history. I know we have several. Richard, you've received one, where they honor, and past recipients come and they thank them for their service. And there's a lot of camaraderie and some food and a big celebration of all the hard work. And you're seeing some of that here tonight where, you know, some PTA folks are going out and into the community and getting grants and bringing them into our students about issues that are important. So congratulations to all those winners. Thank you for all the work that the PTA does to make our schools as vibrant as they are.
thank you. Southwest General Hospital, there have been no meetings. I think that will be coming up in April.
For Strongsville Education Foundation, I believe the casino night has been set for November 22nd, 2025.
Oh, wow, okay,
And their next meeting is March 13th at 7:30 a.m.
great, thank you.
Busy morning, for sure.
Yeah, it is. All right, board committee reports, Finance Committee. Michelle.
I think there's an upcoming. Yeah, there is. On Wednesday, we're having a meeting at 6:30 right here. If you're curious to talk about finances some more, join us.
We'll be reviewing our investments, our investment strategy.
All right,
And our rep from Meter will be here to co-present with me.
perfect.
All right.
Policies to be determined, that comes up here pretty soon.
Yeah.
So that concludes that.
Okay. Facilities Committee.
We did have a meeting 3 weeks ago. Good meeting. We went over some of our immediate needs that are going to have decisions made regarding HVAC and roofing and, what we have talked about for a number of meetings, that our window of opportunity is passing, and the idea of being able to build new schools, that conversation is still to be had, but we have immediate needs and immediate concerns with the existing buildings. And I know the next meeting is May 20th at 6:30, but we also have an expectation that they will be coming to one of our work sessions real soon now to go over some of the recommendations from that committee. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Business Advisory Council.
Business Advisory Council is, first of all, the PTA meeting is the 6th, right? Not the 13th.
Sharon sent me the 13th, but I don't.
I just messaged her and asked too, and I said, wait a minute, they're both the same day? It looks like the PTA meeting is March 6th,
Okay,
and the SEF is March 13th.
great, thank you.
So if anyone's planning on attending those. For Business Advisory, February 7th was our last meeting. We broke into 4 groups. There was resume section where students brought their resumes and business partners reviewed the resumes and provided feedback on do's and don'ts and resume best practices. There was a mock interview section where students participated in a mock interview with business partners asking potential interview questions. There was the interview prep company research, where students needed to understand a company and the many layers some companies have in terms of career functions. Business partners shared the best practices for the company and industry research and other prep topics students should partake in prior to an interview. And I was part of the Q&A session, where students came prepared to ask questions that were on their minds as they were thinking about careers and interests and preparing for life beyond high school. And they brought questions, but a lot of the conversation that we had was kind of just spur of the moment, and we said, what kind of questions do you actually have that aren't necessarily written down? And it allowed for more of like a free conversation and more of a comfortable conversation. Overall, it was a very great experience. The kids had a lot of fun. They came prepared. They came dressed to impress. They shook our hands. They made eye contact. It was wonderful. They were very, very professional and very, very mature for their ages. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. All right. Next on our agenda is the consent calendar. Action by the Board of Education and adoption of consent calendar at this point of the agenda means that all items appearing in this agenda denoted as type-action consent, which items constitute the consent calendar, are adopted by one single motion unless a member of the board or the superintendent requests that such items be removed from the consent calendar and voted upon separately. Do we have any items that need to be removed? Hearing none, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Ms. Stavcik, second by Mrs. Bissell. George, take the roll.
Ms. Stavcek?
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell?
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Yes.
Mrs. Hausum?
Yes. Motion passes. Next, superintendent's timely information.
Well, we got a few updates around the district that are exciting to share. So starting with the elementary level, we're going to go to Whitney Elementary School this month and highlight our second grade teachers over there, Ms. Bova, Mrs. Locks, and Mrs. McKinley. So I think this is such a cool project. It's the second year that they've done it. It's called Hearts Around America. So the students in second grade reach out to family and friends, and those family and friends put things on social media. But the idea is to gather Valentine's Day cards and see how far of a span they could reach across the country and outside of our country. So as you can see, they get all the cards in, they put them on a display on the wall, they put hearts on the states and countries where they get cards from. So far, they received 144 cards from 34 states and 15 different countries, with California being the furthest state and Australia being the furthest country to send cards to the kids. Not only is this a cool activity to see how far you could reach and understand and build your awareness of those around the world, but also Mrs. Lewis, our media specialist at the elementary level, worked with the students to create some quick facts, understanding of the states and countries where these cards came from. So just a neat, engaging activity for the kids to participate in, and just a way to think outside of the box and work on a whole bunch of skills that they can work on through that project in a fun and exciting way. Next, I got my clicker here, George. I don't need to give you a heads up. So next, if you were able to go to the Chamber State of the Schools presentation, we were able to highlight this as well. But at the middle school, Mr. Rodak, Mrs. Smith, and Mr. Mester all collaborated on creating a deeper learning experience for their kids. So this combines our Career Connections class with some of our Makerspace Tech classes with our media specialist. And so what they had is Mr. Rodak, through one of his connections, our kids volunteer at a senior luncheon. And so they met a family at the senior luncheon, and the individual, one of the ladies, she had a stroke. And based on the stroke, her hand was clenched. And so they came in and talked to the kids about, hey, because of this issue that I can't open my hand without forcing it open, there's issues of atrophy or, sores or things of that nature. And so what can you do to help me out? Here's some medical data, medical device company come in and share. And so the kids actually designed in Tinkercad medical devices that could be used to help alleviate the challenges that the community member was having. They actually made them in the 3D printer and were able to test them with our community member to see how they work. So as you can see in the picture, Finn was an 8th grade student that came to the Chamber luncheon to share his story of what he created and developed. So again, when we take a look at real authentic experiences, here's a problem a community member was having, brought it into our schools to look at how can we solve that problem, and then having to present it to an authentic audience. It doesn't get much better than that in terms of learning experiences for our kids. And to look at, all of our staff members collaborating and putting this together, and Mr. Rodak, who presented, shared, I didn't really have any idea about Tinkercad and what to do, but Mr. Mester did, and Mrs. Smith was able to help with the 3D printing, and he was able to build the connection. So just an awesome project at the middle school that exemplifies the great work that's happening there. And finally, as I'm doing the last one, Dan, if you can come up to the podium, because I want you to help me out with the last slide. But we want to talk about Mrs. Hostler's AP research class. So we've had this for a handful of years. It's an AP offering that we started to offer, or we started to have maybe, 5, 6 years ago. But it's a great opportunity for kids to pick a topic that's interesting to them and actually do almost like a mini master's thesis or dissertation. So they select any topic of interest. They do basically a lit review. Let me find out what people have learned and studied about this. Then they develop a plan of action and research methodology to see what they want to do. They conduct the research, whether it's by surveys or a variety of experiments to produce the results, and then they have to write a final paper culminating their research. So I've had the opportunity a handful of years to go into the class and kind of share research methodology and things to consider. And so I've always enjoyed hearing what the kids were doing. Some of the topics for this year is whether or not music affects your perception of time. I thought that was pretty cool and interesting. Which social media app has the most effect on your mindfulness, and which video format has the biggest impact on short and long form memory retention. So cool and timely topics from the kids, and Alyssa does a phenomenal job of facilitating that class for us. And the reason I asked Dan to come up is he has been instrumental with Jenny and a team of people in re-envisioning and continuing the momentum last year with our State of the Schools event. So Dan, if you can kind of give a little pitch and highlight for what that's going to be this year.
Sure. Excuse me. We're really excited about the upcoming State of the Schools, an annual event that we have in our district. But we reimagined it to be the basis of the Model Mustang experience. So we talk about the different skills that we're building in our students. And students and teachers have volunteered to bring real-life examples and examples of what they're doing in the classrooms to this event on Wednesday, March 26th from 6 to 8 p.m. at Strongsville High School. It'll be an interactive experience. There'll be activities there, again, showcasing and highlighting the 5 different model Mustang competencies that are being built in our classrooms.
Yeah. We're excited to be even bigger and better than we were last year with what we tried to do. So a ton of work has already gone into it. We've got a great team planning it and putting it on. So I know the board will be there, and encourage all of our parents and community members to come out and see what their investment is producing in our kids in our school district. Thank you, Dan. Just a couple dates.
Where in the high school?
Main gymnasium, probably spill over into the cafeteria too, so.
Just a couple reminders. Tomorrow, as we know, we have school. It's one of those couple days where we got some kids in, some kids out. So as we've said in many updates, K-5 is home tomorrow. 6 to 12 is at school. I want to give a shout out to Aaron, the elementary principals, and our elementary instructional coaches. Am I missing anybody? So it's a half PD day tomorrow, half records day. In the morning, they're doing, all the staff will be over at Kinsler to do professional development. They've always done phenomenal PD, but this is a great set of sessions that they have. I'll share it with the board in my update tomorrow so you can see. But what's exciting is you've got administrators, you've got instructional coaches leading a variety of timely topics to help one another and grow and develop their skills. So I think it's going to be a great morning for our teachers to continue to learn and grow together tomorrow. On Friday, March 14th, that's our last full staff professional development day of the year, so there'll be no school for the kids and a 3-day weekend for them. And then at the end of the March into the first week of April is spring break for the school district. So with that, that concludes my timely information.
Great. All right, thank you. Next, we have the third and final reading of our bylaws and policies. Do we need to do anything special with that? Does anybody?
You have to, this is an action one.
Okay, sorry. So I need a motion.
Mhm.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Do we have any discussion?
I was going to request and recommend that we table the definitions bylaw. Suffering from insomnia. I reread it again, and there's no issue with the definitions, except that I think some of the language in the definitions and how we define personal communication devices conflicts with or is confused by some of the other policies. Specifically, the way I read it, school devices that we as a Board of Education or the district supply are not considered personal communication devices. And other parts of the policy, there's consequences for inappropriate use and things like that. It just, I think anyone looking at it with common sense would say that's not how we intended it to be, but these policies become very prescriptive and very legalistic. So I think it's best that we table that one and bring it back after we've reviewed it and thought through the consequences. And I apologize for having insomnia.
Was that the only one?
I think that's the one, if we table it, then the other ones can go forward and won't
Okay.
have an issue.
Okay, great. So do we have to do?
So what I'll do is I'll edit the agenda just to remove it.
Okay.
You want me to do that for you, George? Or you
I'm doing it right now.
Okay.
Okay, it's updated.
Okay, great. Any other discussion? All right, hearing none, can you take the roll?
Mrs. Bissell? I'm sorry, Ms. Stochek?
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell?
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Yes.
And Mrs. Hausum?
Yes. All right, motion passes. Next, we have Board of Education Other. We have the Ohio Department of Education Workforce Model Policies and Procedures. Be it resolved that the Strongsville City School Board of Education approves the resolution contained in the exhibit to comply with Senate Bill 29. This is an action item, so I need a motion.
So moved?
Second? Motion by Ms. Stavcek, second by Mrs. Bissell. Dr. Ryba, do you want to talk
Sure.
about what we're voting on?
Sure, there's been a couple things that have changed with the Ohio Department of Education workforce. One was earlier in the curriculum section in terms of gifted procedures, and this one. So basically what this says is the Department of Education workforce has created special education model policies as well as forms that districts are required to use. This resolution says we understand that, and we agree to use them, and then in the next few months, there'll be a reporting structure where we have to go online and check a box that says, yes, we've agreed, and the board has adopted these measures saying we're agreeing. So it's a compliance measure from the state that says you've got to use this, your board has to approve saying you're going to use this, and then we've got to report that all that has been taken care of. So that's what this is about.
Great. Any questions? All right, hearing none, George, can you take the roll?
Ms. Stochek?
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell?
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Yes.
Mrs. Hausum?
Yes. Motion passes. Next is miscellaneous. Do we have any other miscellaneous information from the board? All right. Hearing none, we have meeting notifications. A regular Board of Education meeting work session will be held Thursday, March 13th, 2025 at 7 p.m. in the meeting room of the admin building, 18199 Cook Avenue, Strongsville, Ohio. And then we have a regular Board of Education meeting to be held Thursday, March 27th, 2025 at 6:15 executive session, followed by public session at approximately 7 p.m. in the meeting room of the admin building, 18199 Cook Avenue, Strongsville, Ohio. We do have need for executive session to,
Consider the employment of a public employee and to prepare for negotiations or bargaining sessions with public employees concerning their compensation or other terms and conditions of their employment.
do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Ms. Stavcek, second by Mrs. Bissell.
Ms. Stochek?
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell?
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Yes.
Mrs. Hausum?
Yes. We will enter into executive session at approximately 9:03 PM. We do not see any need to come back into public session, so I want to wish everybody a good night. Thank you.